Well, Denver Broncos wide receiver Jerry Jeudy be ready to go for the season opener this upcoming Sunday against the Las Vegas Raiders. That's the million-dollar question. We'll cover that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. Every single day, Broncos Country. You can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure you do us a favor. If you're not yet subscribed or followed through the show, hit that button down below so you never miss out on a day's worth of Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more every single day. All year long, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. Joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Sayre, Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Broncos Country, I think this week's a big week, right? You know, there might be something going on here, but somebody told me, sources say, it's game week, and we're excited to break it all down here for you. And look, Sayre, this is, I think, what every fan in Broncos Country has been waiting for. Now, everything that the Broncos do from this point on, it matters. It starts this week in practice. It sets the tone for the week one regular season opener, and it carries on from now to the end of the season.
That's right, Cody. The anticipation has officially mounted about as high as I think it can get, right? It's not just a new quarterback coming in anymore, right? It's Sean Payton, one of the best head coaches in modern NFL history, if not just NFL history in general, right? I mean, I think we've talked about it all offseason, all the different storylines and angles, but you're right. Everybody in Broncos Country is ready for this team to prove whether or not they're going to be back on the right track. It's been a long 6-7 years since they won Super Bowl 50. And yes, the team did have a winning record in 2016 with Trevor Siemian and Gary Kubiak still as the quarterback and head coach brain trust. But it's been tough sledding ever since then, losing records every year, getting beat by the Chiefs every year since 2015. A shocking losing streak against this Raiders team in particular. So right now it's time for the Broncos to kind of put, put things right again. It's like somebody came into the house and destroyed everything. And everybody's like, wait a second, who was in our house? It's like the scene from Christmas Vacation, where the couple comes home and their stereo's destroyed, the window's broken. That's what the Broncos have been like the last 6 years. Everybody's wondering like, well, who broke in through the window? Who busted the stereo here? That's what 6 years in Broncos Country of losing has done to everybody. Expectations, like we've been talking about, Cody, they're kind of been lowered, I feel like, by the fan base. But now that excitement is definitely ramping up, and we're hoping that a full complement of players will be out there for the Broncos.
Well, the thing, too, is like it's game week, right? And usually you see it all the time. We've seen it in our YouTube comments. We've seen it on social media where fans have interacted with us. Like, everyone's like, okay, I'm coming into the season with low expectations, but I'm still hopeful that things are going to be great, right? And that's really been the theme for the last 6 years, even though people say they're going to have low expectations, the Broncos' expectations are always high amongst the fan base, amongst media, amongst themselves, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing. But because expectations often create narratives, create questions about maybe a week, what are some things that we want to have answered this week in particular? I think probably the biggest thing that we're all waiting to see what gets answered. Will Jerry Jeudy be ready to play this week against the Raiders? And Sayre, to be honest with you, like this is, in my opinion, right now, the biggest question for this team coming into week one. Having Jerry Jeudy out there makes you feel a lot better, right? If you don't have him, then obviously the amount of pressure I think that the team faces, it increases exponentially. But we do have to remember, Sean Payton has dealt with this before in New Orleans. I mean, there was a time I remember looking at his New Orleans roster. I think it was in 2020, 2019, where they had to have like 15, 16 different receivers on their roster in the regular season because of injuries. He's been able to navigate without guys, and I think that's exactly what we're going to see. Like if Jerry Jeudy's unable to go, what will we see? What is the plan here for Sean Payton? How does he plan to attack the Raiders defense from an offensive perspective? But the biggest question, will Jerry Jeudy be ready to go? I'm very, very hopeful. I've been praying to the hamstring god, Bo Lowry, this week here and seeing if things happen here.
We'll see what happens with the hamstring god, Cody. It doesn't appear the Broncos are super nervous about it, right? I mean, we can kind of read between the lines of what they've done in terms of roster moves. they actually released, I think while we were away, they released Michael Bandy from the practice squad. So that's one less wide receiver who has been in this offense for the last handful of weeks. Lil Jordan Humphrey is, I think, the only wide receiver on the practice squad who knows the offense right now, Cody, or who's at least known the offense throughout the course of the majority of the offseason. So if you read between the lines of the Broncos' decisions that they've made, only keeping 4 wide receivers on the 53-man roster, only keeping a couple of guys, and then cutting one who knows the playbook on the practice squad, it all leads up to this idea that maybe there is, I mean, maybe we're not wearing tinfoil hats here on this one. Maybe Jerry Jeudy will play in week 1, if nothing else. The Broncos are going to inspire at least a little bit of fear in the Las Vegas Raiders to think that Jerry Jeudy has a chance of playing. And I think that that's going to do its job in and of itself. So we hope he plays. But hamstring injuries, as you know, Cody, it's really not something that a wide receiver, especially one whose strengths are as Jerry Jeudy's route running, quickness, after the catch, change of direction. A hamstring injury is not to be trifled with. So he's going to have to be close to or at 100% to be out there and to be effective, or risk really further injury.
And that's the tough thing about it, right? Because hamstrings are the most sensitive type of injury because you can make great progress, right? For guys that have had a 4-week recovery, you make great progress through 4 weeks. One simple move sets you back a whole another 6 to 8 weeks. So if Jerry is not close to 90 or 100%, Sayre, I don't think we're going to see him in Sunday's game, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, you have a whole season ahead of you. You don't want to get him back for 1 game, lose him for 6 or 7 more. You want to, okay, if he misses 1 or 2 games, comes back for the rest, you're happy with that. And you have, I think, other options here. As we've talked about here, we expect to see a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets here for the Broncos this upcoming week. And hey, look, now we're talking about an offense that is also reliant on getting the running backs involved in the passing game more so than any other Broncos offense has probably in the last 5 to 6 years. So not only are the wide receivers going to be involved, the tight ends going to be involved, but the running backs as well. So you have enough production-based guys that can maybe supplement, maybe not having Jerry out there. Hard to replace what Jerry does on the field, but this is where you can maybe attack different areas of a defense. And this is where I think Sean Payton, his first real game as the Broncos head coach and how he manages it, how the coaches do. This is really where we're going to get a great test to maybe see what is in store here for the Sean Payton offense. And, you know, aside from all that, I think maybe some things to keep an eye on here for Broncos country this week. I think we will get the first official depth chart. So I'll be very curious to see what does the wide receiver pecking order look like right now, considering Jerry's injury. You know, we know where Jaleel is at right now, but, you know, what's the pitch count going to look like here for Javonte Williams? Like, there's still some other questions that we have to have answered coming up into this week. And even Sean Payton might tell us, like, we may not even know this week exactly where we are with some of those things, but I imagine it's going to be an all hands on deck approach here for the Broncos offense, Broncos defense this upcoming Sunday when they take on the Las Vegas Raiders. Broncos country game week is here. We are stoked about it. There's some other things we got to talk about, though, including as week 1 approaches, what are our expectations for some Broncos rookies and undrafted players that we know will get some playing time on Sunday against the Raiders? Well, you're going to get all that on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at Underdog Fantasy. Football season kicks off this Thursday, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with Underdog Fantasy and their Pick'em game. Just pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually spend kickoff night doing, watching the game. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, but you can win real money. It's legal in over 30 states, and it's a ton of fun. If you want to build your dream team today, head over to use their easy-to-use mobile app or their website, underdogfantasy.com. When you sign up with the promo code Locked On, that's one word, Locked On, and not only will Underdog double your first deposit of up to $100, but they also have a Pick'em special live now in their Pick'em lobby. Patrick Mahomes just has to get 1 yard for your pick to be correct. Remember, that's Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with promo code Locked On and use the link in the description or scan the QR code if you're watching us on YouTube.
What are the expectations for the Denver Broncos rookies in week 1 against the Las Vegas Raiders? We're going to break that down and maybe what to expect from a couple of undrafted guys, not just the drafted guys getting involved this upcoming week. But before we do, we got to give a huge shout out to every single one of you out there that listens to Locked On Broncos every single day, free and available everywhere that you get podcasts. Cody, for the everydayers out there, it's time. The season is here. We've been grinding all offseason, and we can't thank you enough for joining in the conversation, however you choose to do so. If you hit us up on Twitter, if you're jumping in the comments on YouTube, where you can also watch us every single day. Cody, we can't thank everybody in Broncos country enough for participating, for being such an important part of the show. We love and appreciate every single one of you, however you decide or choose to listen on a daily basis. And Cody, look, I mean, I know that the Broncos have some exciting rookies, but their involvement in week 1 is a bit of a mystery. I don't quite think we're going to see anybody in this rookie class playing over 100 snaps like we saw Travis Hunter for the Colorado Buffaloes on Saturday, which was awesome to see. But look, although we have to wait a couple years for Travis to enter the NFL, it's game 1 for guys like Marvin Mims, Drew Sanders, Jaleel McLaughlin, Nate Adkins. What do you think we can expect from these rookies in week 1? We just got done talking about Jerry Jeudy. Let's start with Marvin Mims. Could he have a bigger week 1 role than maybe anyone thought a couple of months ago?
I think that's absolutely in line, to be honest with you here. And look, I think for all these guys, like we talk about rookies and undrafted guys, they made the 53-man roster, Sarah. So you know what that means? It means the expectations in general are going to be high for them. And I think for Marvin Mims, I think that's going to be maybe the dynamic that we see. Like some of the stuff that Jerry was doing, I think not only are we going to see maybe guys like Brandon Johnson contribute in that role, but I think Marvin Mims, based on his explosiveness and his speed and his ability, I think he's going to be in line to do some of these special things that we're talking about. I can't go into detail about maybe what I've seen them use Marvin doing and the things and schemes that they've been trying to get him involved with. There's been some hints in the preseason where we have seen a little bit of that, but I think that he's going to have the expectations on him are going to be a little bit higher, right? And I think for us, what do we want to see him do? I think ideally, no drop passes. You don't want to see that for anybody, right? But ideally, can you get involved in the blocking game as a wide receiver? Can you be a decoy that you're causing a little bit of concern here when the coaches go back after that first or second series on offense, but for them on the defensive side of the ball, they're watching the iPad and they're saying, gosh, hey, this 83 guy, he's fast. We really have to keep an eye on him. Make sure, hey, when they come out in this formation, we cheat over to his side a little bit just because we have to respect his speed, to the point where it creates a one-on-one matchup situation with Cortland Sutton or Greg Dulcich or whoever else may be out there, including Jerry Jeudy possibly if he does play. So for me, I think that's the expectation is how does he, with all the traits and the vision that they said that they've seen from him, how does that carry out here in the first game of the NFL regular season for Marvin Mims? That's what I'm excited to see. But I'm also excited to see a little bit of Drew Sanders here, Sarah. Now, in your opinion, as we know, Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton are going to start. What are your expectations here for the Broncos rookie linebacker that the way he moves, once again, it's like you look at that linebacker room, those 3 guys, they're all piss missiles, and we love that.
I love it, Cody. I think with Drew Sanders, we can maybe expect a little bit of the unexpected, right? Because Vance Joseph, Broncos defensive coordinator, he said a couple of weeks ago, hey, there may be a role or there is a role for Drew Sanders that we're going to unveil in the fall, but you won't be seeing it now. I'm very, very fascinated to find out what that is. And even it's more amplified for me, Cody, knowing that Baron Browning is out on the PUP for a handful of weeks here, 4 weeks at a minimum for him. So with Drew Sanders, now we're getting to the point to where, okay, is he going to float to the edge a little bit? Because he looked in the preseason, and I've said this before, you got to have your best 11 guys out there at all times, right? And he looks like he may be in contention to be one of the best 11 players on that Denver Broncos defense. Now, that might be a little bit of a hot take, but I don't know. I'm not so sure about that. I think when you look at this roster, you look at all 3 levels, Drew Sanders is someone who proved in the preseason that he can do a number of things. Yeah, he can rush the passer. He can play in space. He can attack the line of scrimmage. He can cover. So I think against the Raiders week 1, there's no more Darren Waller. at the tight end position, but they've reloaded there. Obviously, they've got the rookie it's Michael Mayer. I was going to say Michael Myers. I've got Halloween on the brain, but Michael Mayer from Notre Dame. It's certainly going to be a challenge. So the Broncos maybe use him as a matchup player, maybe send him at Jimmy Garoppolo a time or two. And I can't wait to see what he brings to the table. But the biggest storylines of preseason seem to be the fact this team set a franchise record with undrafted free agents making that initial 53-man roster. We will not see Alex Palczewski placed on IR, but we will see Jaleel McLaughlin and we will see Nate Adkins, Cody. What do you think we can expect from those two guys here in game one?
Well, for me, Jaleel is just such a blur. He's so fun to watch. To me, this will be his biggest test, right? Because I still think we're trying to figure out what's the pitch count going to be for Javonte. And even Sean Payton told us last week, they got to figure that out themselves, what it's going to look like here for week one. We know Samaje is going to get a healthy bulk of carries and obviously looks in Sunday's season opener here. But when it comes to Jaleel McLaughlin, I'm not sure what to expect here for the Broncos. What will his usage look like against a big front that's got Tyree Wilson? It's got Chandler Jones, Max Crosby, and obviously some pretty decent linebackers that come up and feel very hard here. They've revamped that defense a little bit in Vegas from all the reports that we have seen. But how does Jaleel fit into that? Like, the moment doesn't ever seem big enough for Jaleel. And that's one thing I like is, what did Brian Baldinger say when doing a film review? And he said, he's like, the way he runs and hits the hole is like smoke through a keyhole, which visually that's just so pleasing on the mind. But it's like, yeah, how does he do against a guy like Max Crosby, who is unbelievably big, freakish, and is probably going to be one of the bigger tests that Denver faces here early on here? Do you have him in, like, can Jaleel maybe play a little bit of that joker role that we've heard Sean Payton talk about as much? We factor in maybe guys like Greg Dulcich. I mean, I look at Nate Adkins, I look at Jaleel. These guys could play that role a little bit because of their versatility. So for me, I do think we're going to see quite a bit of that out of 12 and 13 personnel. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what the realistic expectation is here for Jaleel.
Yeah, I can't wait to find out, Cody, because I mean, you hear some people say Darren Sproles and it gets your mind racing a little bit. And so we want to see him get involved. I don't know if it's going to be quite Darren Sproles like to begin with, but hey, I mean, Tyler Beatty took his first NFL reception to the house. Phillip Lindsay took his first NFL reception to the house. I mean, the Broncos may have a little streak going there with some late round or undrafted running backs who are a little undersized but speedy. I'm excited to see Nate Adkins now. I know you've been talking about him since OTAs. This is a guy who's very impressive in terms of his versatility. He can do a lot of different things for your offense, may not show up in the box score. So I guess we're going to kind of just have to keep watch for him, when it comes to what is his role going to be. Well, I think he's kind of just going to be all over the field, right? He may not be making 8 receptions or anything like that, but he may get involved. He may just be blocking. He may be, a decoy. He may get, who knows what's going to happen with Nate Adkins' special teams. I think we can expect that. So there's a lot going on with him that may not show up at the end of the day. You may not be saying, hey, who was the player of the game today? You may not necessarily be saying Nate Adkins because he's not going to necessarily go out there and get you 100 receiving yards and a couple of touchdowns, but that doesn't really matter. That's not why the Broncos kept him, right? They kept him to do a lot of dirty work, which quite frankly, he was very good at South Carolina. And I think now good enough to make a 53-man roster in the NFL.
Watch him surprisingly get over 100 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns just because we said that now. Watch.
Right.
It works that way. I wouldn't be surprised in a Sean Payton style offense here. But Broncos Country, make sure if you're listening or you're watching, you let us know your thoughts on what your expectations are for the rookies that we just talked about: Marvin Mims, Jaleel McLaughlin, Nate Adkins, and even Drew Sanders a little bit. Make sure you let us know how you're feeling about them. But we also had a chance to catch up with wide receiver Brandon Johnson and undrafted rookie free agent Nate Adkins last week following practice. Some good insight into them and maybe some things you didn't know about Nate Adkins that we'll bring forth here on today's episode. Locked On Broncos. Our friends over there at eBay Motors, they've teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft or you're scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the week. Let's take a look at Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Calvin Ridley. If you're looking for a player to take in fantasy football drafts who will spark his team's offense this upcoming season and also help you speed to victory, then use a luxury pick on Jaguars wide receiver Calvin Ridley. Ridley has looked sleek during his first camp in Jacksonville and ready to rev up again after his time in Atlanta, taking full advantage of riding with rising Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback. Combined with his impeccable route running skills, Calvin Ridley is our eBay Motors choice of the week here for you. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, tail lights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it. eBay Motors, they have it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car or truck, because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. As we continue on our conversation on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, real quick, just want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day every single day. You can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch us every single day or evening on YouTube. We appreciate you so much for being part of us every single day, all year long. All you everydayers out there, thank you so much, Sayre. Let's talk about, obviously Labor Day weekend. Hope all of you had a very, very good time with your friends, family, had some time off to recoup before the NFL season begins. But on Thursday, we had a chance to go to practice at the Sayre Health Training Center and watch as the Broncos had all 53 players. You had all your 17 practice squad players in attendance for the Broncos. But we got to catch up with Brandon Johnson, Nate Adkins. We got to catch up with Jaleel McLaughlin and even Elijah Garcia and Thomas Incoom following practice on Thursday, but had a chance to specifically talk and sit down here with Nate Adkins and Brandon Johnson specifically. I think kind of going back to our theme of the show, one of the bigger questions that we had here is, okay, hey, if Jerry Jeudy does not play this week, what is the expectation inside the wide receiver room? Because as it stands right now, you're going to have Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims, and Brandon Johnson, 3 healthy receivers out of your 4 total wide receivers you have on the 53. Plus, you're going to talk about, okay, hey, we already understand a little Jordan Humphrey's more than likely to be a game day elevation, not factoring into that. But what is the standard for the Broncos wide receiver room? Well, here's what Broncos wide receiver Brandon Johnson, who made the 53-man roster this year, had to say about the standard. And really, it starts with Sean Payton.
They haven't changed at all. It's a standard in the receiver room that starts with our coach and starts with us as players. And whoever's playing, we got to play to that standard.
Johnson's just a really sharp guy, isn't he? I mean, he just exudes the type of confidence that you need to see from somebody who has apparently ascended to a wide receiver 3 role on an NFL team at with quite a bit going against him, right? He was an undrafted free agent last year, didn't get a huge bonus to come to the Broncos, but look, I mean, dating back to his time in high school, Cody, this is a guy who's been coached by NFL players. He was high school teammates with Pat Surtain and a number of other NFL guys. Actually, Pat Surtain Sr. was one of his coaches in high school. His dad, Gold Glove, All-Star, MLB. I mean, he knows what it is to be a pro, right? I mean, he's been around these guys for a long time. So the mindset is there. And I'm excited to see what he brings to the table when he actually gets to play in a meaningful regular season game. By the time he got out there last year, the Broncos were kind of in evaluation mode, and it just kind of felt like, well, here's Brandon Johnson. Now that the games matter and he's going to have a substantial role, I can't wait to see what he's going to do. And I think maybe there's an opportunity there for the coaches to really open up the playbook for him.
That's something he's excited to see as well. And I always think it's cool. And I think we all forget this sometimes because how bad last year was. But Russell Wilson's 300th touchdown pass was to Brandon Johnson. And Russ let Brandon Johnson keep that, his first career touchdown. Like, just goes to show what type of guy that Russell Wilson is. Like 300 touchdown passes in the NFL. It's a big freaking deal there. He got a ball, but it wasn't the ball that he threw there. So I think that was a really cool moment there for Brandon Johnson. But how he's continued to maybe understand and master the playbook has been big. But even he himself said that he cannot wait for Broncos head coach Sean Payton to open up the playbook. Here's why.
I'm excited to see the playbook like fully opened up. You know how preseason is, we get a watered down version. We're trying to, run basic plays, make sure everybody knows what they're doing. But I can't wait until he really opens up the playbook. I'm excited.
Can't wait to see it, Cody. I'm excited. I think as critical as I've been of the wide receiver position from, I guess, the beginning of the offseason until now, look, Brandon Johnson is an exciting player, and I think he now quickly becomes a potential breakout player. As that's kind of a buzzword this time of year. You're looking for who could be breakout players around the league for every NFL team. Of course, for the Broncos, you gravitate towards guys like Greg Dulcich, Jonathan Cooper, Caden Stearns, but Brandon Johnson is on that list. He's a big-time breakout player candidate for the Broncos. Increased role, I think. Let's see them open up the playbook. That's all I can say, Cody. I'm pumped to see what he brings to the table.
If some of the stuff that we saw in the preseason is the watered down version, I'm very, very curious to see what it's like with no chaser here for Sean Payton and the Broncos offense. Obviously something that's big, but we also had a chance to hear from Broncos undrafted rookie free agent fullback tight end, do it all, Nate Adkins, who made the 53-man roster. Now, found out something very interesting about him that I never knew previously. Obviously, he only had one top 30 visit, and it was to the Denver Broncos, which factored into him going there. But, he's playing fullback, he's playing tight end. Blocking has always been ingrained in him because he never actually played tight end in high school. Here's what he had to say.
What I grew up doing, my dad's an offensive line coach, so it was kind of what I've been around my whole life. In high school, I never even played tight end, so I played offensive line. So kind of just grew up having a blocking base, and that's kind of, how my game grew, starting from blocking and then kind of just learning, being an athlete, trying to learn all the routes and all the other stuff about playing tight end. So yeah, I think just having that blocking base is, really helped me in this whole process.
I guess that makes a little bit of sense, doesn't it? Right, Cody? Now that we know he played offensive line in high school, a blocking specialist here for the Broncos. And I think that fits perfectly to what Sean Payton wants and needs at this. Remember the Broncos in the pre-draft process, they had that interview with the Paul Hornung Award winner, Jack Coletto from, I believe, Oregon State. They're a guy that can kind of play everywhere, do a little bit of everything for you. Maybe Nate Adkins should have gotten some votes for that award because he did similar stuff at South Carolina, but his blocking prowess is undoubtedly going to be a factor for the Broncos. And I think it's going to be fun to see now that we know he has a bit of an offensive line background, to kind of make you watch him a little bit more closely on plays where he's maybe a lead blocker or maybe where the Broncos line him up in a position to be a key blocker in any situation.
Well, for him playing offensive tackle in high school, with dad being an offensive line coach, you have to have that nastiness in you, which is what we've seen going back to rookie minicamp and tryouts initially there when he got invited. But I also felt it was interesting when we caught up with Darren Muji, Broncos assistant GM last week. He told us about it, and even George Payton told us about him at the podium, that Nate Adkins, he was somebody that they had considered drafting around 6, round 7. But when they found out, hey, he had a chance to be an undrafted guy, they could bring him in, and they feel like they got a tremendous value for him. He's going to play a lot of special teams as well. So I think for the Broncos, they got a guy who's just a grinder, who obviously loves to put the work in behind the scenes, carries himself with humility. And hey, look, we're going to find out a little bit more about Nate Adkins and a lot about this Broncos team in Sunday's opener against the Las Vegas Raiders. And Broncos Country, here's what you can expect all week long here as we build up to week 1 of the NFL regular season. Thursday, you can catch Sayre and our boy Q, your boy Q, over on a crossover episode of Locked On Broncos. We'll go through practice recaps, open locker room. What did we learn from practice, so on and so forth in the buildup. And then we'll obviously get to our keys to the game a little bit later on here in this week. You can expect all that and much more here on Locked On Broncos. But Broncos Country, that'll wrap up today's episode of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, taking time out of your day to listen to us or to watch us. Make sure if you've not done so already, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on daily Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. Thank you so much for being part of the community. Interact with other members of Broncos Country in here as well. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.